You are capable of unimaginable cruelty. Committing an atrocity wouldn't require brainwashing or a psychotic break, only a slight adjustment to your daily routine. We obsess over serial killers and cinematic monsters because they make us feel safe. They isolate malice into rare, defective individuals. But this true crime obsession is a comforting distraction. History's greatest horrors are rarely committed by lone wolves lurking in the shadows. As Professor Jiang Xueqin argues in his thesis on the subject, true evil is almost never a psychological glitch. Instead, it operates as a highly efficient, manufactured administrative mechanism of state power. To understand how mass cruelty actually happens, we have to stop hunting for individual bad apples. We need to investigate the bad barrel makers, the architects who design the systems that make cruelty routine. The foundation of this machinery dates back to the Italian Renaissance. Niccolò Machiavelli decoupled the exercise of power from moral theology. He treated statecraft as a purely technical endeavor, where inflicting harm is simply a necessary practical tool for maintaining control. Centuries later, the philosopher Michel Foucault identified how modern nations evolved this concept into what he called biopolitics. Biopolitics is a framework where the state manages human life as a biological resource, using demographics and social welfare to optimize the population. Under this framework, anything that hinders the productivity of the social body is labeled a threat. The state exercises control by generating a discourse that defines exactly what it means to be deviant. By codifying these norms into law, power structures manufacture a criminal subjectivity, a specific identity imposed on people to justify their subjugation. The state holds the pen. By legally defining which populations are expendable, defective, or threatening to the social order, it drafts the ultimate blueprint for systemic violence. But a blueprint needs a workforce. In 1961, political theorist Hannah Arendt traveled to Jerusalem to cover the trial of a high-ranking Nazi architect of the Holocaust. She expected to find a monstrous fanatic. Instead, looking at Adolf Eichmann in the defendant's glass booth, she found a bland, pompous bureaucrat. He spoke in clichés. He was driven by career advancement, entirely detached from the horrific reality of his daily tasks. Arendt coined a term for this phenomenon: the banality of evil. It is the terrifying reality that the most staggering atrocities are not driven by radical hatred, but by thoughtless conformity. Ordinary people simply follow orders and navigate bureaucratic systems without critical reflection. A decade later, psychologist Philip Zimbardo proved Arendt's historical observations in a laboratory. His infamous Stanford prison experiment demonstrated what he called the Lucifer effect, the rapid transformation of thoroughly normal individuals into perpetrators of abuse when placed in toxic environments. Specific situational forces act as a catalyst. When you introduce de-individuation, stripping away personal identity through uniforms or roles, and demand strict obedience to authority, a normal person's moral compass quickly shuts down. We saw this dynamic play out with devastating clarity among military police guards at Abu Ghraib prison. Compartmentalized bureaucracies and highly structured environments do the heavy lifting. They normalize mass cruelty by breaking horrific actions into mundane tasks, successfully absolving the individual of any overwhelming sense of guilt. But the Benality thesis has a critical blind spot. Historical researchers have pushed back, arguing that figures like Eichmann were not just thoughtless cogs. Instead, they often harbored deep, fanatical hatred, carefully hiding their sadistic malice behind a manufactured and thoroughly boring bureaucratic mask. This brings us to the biological reality of the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad refers to a specific combination of 3 toxic personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. This 3D model highlights the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function and empathy. Clinical studies show that reduced metabolic rates in this area severely diminish a person's ability to connect with the suffering of others. There is a distinct philosophical danger in relying entirely on the theories of Foucault and Zimbardo. If the external situation is completely to blame for atrocious acts, individual moral responsibility effectively vanishes. We become nothing more than biological machines reacting to external pressure. Toxic systems absolutely amplify and streamline atrocity. But the raw biological capacity for malice and the individual agency required to act on it cannot be entirely erased from the equation. The most accurate view of human depravity merges these two models. A truly efficient system of evil requires individuals with Dark Triad traits, positioned at the very top of the hierarchy, intentionally designing the oppressive architecture. Yet these malicious architects are entirely powerless on their own. Their designs only become reality through the blind compliance of ordinary, thoughtless citizens at the bottom, who punch the clock and execute their orders. This dynamic is what researchers call administrative evil, and it operates around us today. It thrives in corporate complicity that prioritizes cost-benefit analyses over human lives, in blind bureaucratic policies, and in modern institutional violence. The most destructive forces in human history are not the result of a single monster running amok. They are born from a perfect, terrifying symbiosis, malicious design at the top, fueled by banal, unthinking execution at the bottom. Which brings us back to you. If mass cruelty is primarily situational and administrative, the barrier protecting you from participating in an atrocity is not a strong moral compass. It is terrifyingly thin, dependent mostly on the environment you inhabit. Professor Jiang issues a stark final warning. An in-depth, nuanced knowledge of this hidden machinery is the only effective inoculation. You must see the gears turning to avoid being pulled into them. Because the dark philosophical reality is that the factory of evil is never fully dismantled. It is only left idling beneath the surface of society, waiting for its next willing operator.